December 16, 1944, 5:30 hours. A thick pre-dawn fog clung to the slopes of Eiffel Ridge, situated along the Belgian-German frontier. Here, the U.S. 106th Infantry Division was entrenched, bracing for the storm that was about to erupt. Across the lines, soldiers of the German 18th Volksgrenadier Division were assembling, ready to launch the initial strike of what would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. They carried the Carabiner 98K, a bolt-action rifle that had been a staple of German infantry for nearly half a century. Its reputation for accuracy and durability was well established, having seen action from the fields of Poland to the outskirts of Moscow. Yet within hours, these troops would confront a stark reality. The tactical advantages of the Carabiner, once decisive, were increasingly undermined by the firepower of modern semi-automatic rifles. German infantry doctrine, developed over decades, emphasized precision over volume. Trained to fire carefully aimed shots at ranges often between 400 and 800 meters, soldiers could manage roughly 15 accurate rounds per minute with the bolt-action Carabiner. By contrast, American riflemen equipped with the M1 Garand could deliver 20 to 24 accurate rounds in the same time frame, a rate of fire that would repeatedly prove decisive during engagements in the Ardennes. The German military's confidence in the Carabiner 98K was not misplaced historically. Introduced in 1898, the Mauser bolt-action system had evolved to perfection, combining reliability with pinpoint accuracy. German infantry manuals codified a philosophy that elevated marksmanship. One well-placed shot was considered far more valuable than a barrage of scattered rounds. Combined with the suppressive power of the MG-42 machine gun, this system had enabled rapid victories in Poland, France, and early campaigns of the Second World War. The Carabiner had also been tested in colonial conflicts and the First World War, reinforcing its status as a weapon of choice for disciplined riflemen. However, the realities of modern combat were beginning to diverge sharply from established doctrine. Analysis conducted after the war by U.S. Army researchers highlighted that German training often focused on ranges longer than most actual engagements, which frequently occurred under 300 meters. This gap between theory and practice would become acutely apparent against American forces whose weaponry and tactics were optimized for these shorter, more realistic distances. German troops had already encountered this disparity during the Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943, where they faced American infantry armed with M1 Garands. While the operation ended in tactical success for the Germans, reports submitted to High Command revealed a troubling pattern that was largely ignored at the time. Reconnaissance elements of the German 10th Panzer Division noted unexpectedly heavy and sustained rifle fire from U.S. units. American infantrymen were able to maintain continuous aimed fire even while conducting strategic withdrawals, a maneuver nearly impossible for forces relying on bolt-action rifles, U.S. said. Intelligence analysis of German casualty reports from Kasserine indicated that the most severe losses occurred during pursuit phases, where retreating American units continued to inflict consistent defensive fire. In the Ardennes, these lessons would manifest with brutal clarity. The combination of American semi-automatic rifles, short-range combat effectiveness, and tactical flexibility would repeatedly expose the limitations of German bolt-action doctrine. Despite decades of proven success with the Carabiner 98K, the realities of modern infantry warfare were shifting, signaling a decisive evolution in the mathematics of firepower. Despite prior warnings, the German triumph at Cassino led many commanders to underestimate the threat posed by American forces. These units, largely inexperienced and under relatively weak leadership, were initially seen as unable to match German tactical expertise, and it was assumed that their weapons could not offset the advantage held by seasoned defenders. The Italian theater between 1943 and 1944 provided a prolonged test of American firepower in conditions that at first seemed to favor German defensive setups. Italy's rugged mountains were expected to benefit defenders wielding bolt-action rifles capable of precise, long-range shots. However, at the Battle of San Pietro in December 1943, the 29th Panzer Grenadier Division encountered American riflemen who consistently delivered effective fire, challenging the German assumptions about small unit engagements. Combat debriefings conducted by the U.S. Army immediately after San Pietro revealed that American infantrymen could sustain suppressive fire while maneuvering independently. Unlike German doctrine, which often depended on machine guns for base fire, each soldier could act as a mobile source of continuous fire. Defensive positions along the winter lines, especially near Monte Cassino, frequently reported difficulty countering these patrols, as the Americans used their semi-automatic rifles to pin down defenders and gain tactical freedom. Army reports indicate that patrols equipped primarily with M1 Garands were capable of producing enough suppressive fire to force German soldiers to stay under cover while the Americans advanced. This represented a significant shift from the established German expectation that defenders could safely move between shots and return fire in turn. The series of battles along the Gothic Line in 1944 further illustrated the widening gap in firepower. German defensive doctrine emphasized brief exposure to return fire, a method that proved inadequate against the semi-automatic weapons of US troops. Units repeatedly informed their higher command that American infantrymen enjoyed a consistent advantage in fire density at all distances under 500 meters. The invasion of Normandy in 1944 starkly highlighted this disparity. The 352nd Infantry Division, tasked with defending Omaha Beach, was composed of veteran soldiers entrenched in well-prepared positions with pre-registered fields of fire. Nevertheless, they found themselves overwhelmed by waves of American troops, each capable of maintaining continuous, aimed fire. Historical records from D-Day describe how soldiers of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions, despite incurring heavy casualties during the initial landings, could advance while keeping enemy positions suppressed. German strongpoints built to endure artillery bombardment gradually succumbed to the relentless fire of thousands of 36 rounds discharged from M1 Garands. As the Normandy campaign progressed into the dense hedgerow terrain, engagement ranges shrank to often less than 50 meters. In such close quarters, the volume of fire proved far more decisive than precision at long range. American infantry tactics shaped at Fort Benning and honed through combat experience emphasized marching fire, the practice of advancing while every rifleman maintained a stream of suppressive fire. This doctrine consistently allowed U.S. troops to pressure German defenders and seize positions, effectively leveraging firepower to overcome entrenched defenses. Following the conclusion of World War II, American military historians analyzed combat operations in Normandy and noted a striking difference in ammunition usage between the two sides. On average, an American rifle company discharged approximately 5,000 rounds daily during active engagements, whereas a German rifle company used about 1,500 rounds. This gap was not a matter of inefficiency but reflected fundamentally different tactical doctrines and capabilities. The key factor was the widespread adoption of semi-automatic rifles among US WWII soldiers, enabling continuous suppressive fire that was simply not possible with the German bolt-action rifles. At the center of this tactical shift was the M1 Garand, developed by Canadian-American designer John Garand and formally adopted by the US Army in 1936. Although it fired the same .20-36 cartridge as the older Springfield rifles, the M1 Garand offered a gas-operated semi-automatic mechanism with an 8-round en-bloc clip, dramatically increasing the rate of sustained fire. When compared to the German Karabiner 98K, the differences were significant. The M1 could deliver 16 to 24 aimed shots per minute, while the Kar 98K managed roughly 15. Its magazine held 8 rounds versus the Kar 98K's 5, while effective combat range remained roughly equivalent at around 440 yards for the average infantryman. Weight differences were minimal, with the M1 at 9.5 pounds and the Kar 98K slightly lighter at 8.8 pounds. German intelligence thoroughly examined captured Garands, producing detailed reports such as one from the Kumdorf Proving Grounds in 1943. They recognized the rifle's mechanical dependability, even acknowledging the complexity of its design. Yet, German analyses tended to focus narrowly on the weapon's individual features, largely overlooking how it transformed squad-level tactics in American infantry units. The broader tactical impact was evident at the squad level. Unlike German squads, which concentrated suppressive fire primarily through the MG-42 machine gun, American squads distributed firepower evenly across all members. A typical US rifle squad could sustain 160 to 200 aimed rounds per minute, compared to just 40 to 70 rounds from rifles in a German squad. The M1 Garand allowed American squads to create suppressive effects without relying solely on machine guns, fundamentally altering battlefield dynamics. These advantages became particularly evident during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. Despite deploying veteran troops and achieving the element of surprise, German forces struggled against American rifle fire. On December 16, elements of the WWII's 99th Infantry Division near Lanzerath delayed the advance of the Panzer spearhead of the 6th Army through relentless small arms fire, disrupting the coordination between German infantry and armor. Similarly, the surrounded 101st Airborne Division near Bastogne held critical defensive positions, in part due to the sustained firepower provided by semi-automatic rifles. The confrontation underscored how semi-automatic infantry weapons, coupled with effective squad tactics, could decisively counter even experienced and numerically superior forces. In sum, the combination of the M1 Garand and innovative American squad doctrine fundamentally shifted infantry combat in World War II, providing a level of sustained, distributed firepower that the German army's traditional tactics and bolt-action rifles could not match. Combat analyses from World War II consistently highlighted the inability of German infantry assaults to succeed when following their conventional doctrine of advancing under suppressive fire from machine guns. Across engagements in the Ardennes, small unit skirmishes repeatedly demonstrated a clear trend. German soldiers trained in the standard fire and move techniques, which anticipated brief pauses in enemy shooting, found these pauses largely non-existent when facing US WWII troops equipped with semi-automatic rifles. American soldiers could fire effectively while advancing, rapidly reload using the clip system, and sustain continuous suppressive fire, leaving German attackers exposed. The impact of the M1 Garand extended beyond its battlefield utility. The rifle's production scale was equally decisive. Springfield Armory, together with Winchester Repeating Arms Company, manufactured a total of 440,800 M1 Garands throughout the war. At the height of output in January 1944, Springfield alone was producing nearly 3,936 rifles per day. To put this in perspective, German semi-automatic rifles such as the G43 K43 were produced in far smaller numbers, just 462,000 in total, giving the United States an overwhelming production advantage of roughly 8.7 to 1. This disparity meant that nearly all American infantry units were equipped with semi-automatic rifles, while fewer than 5% of German frontline troops had access to similar weapons. The US achieved this remarkable scale through innovative manufacturing strategies. Springfield Armory evolved from a traditional government arsenal into a modernized production hub, borrowing methods from the automotive industry. Workers with minimal firearms experience could complete simple, repetitive tasks which, when combined, resulted in the mass production of thousands of rifles per day. Standardized, interchangeable parts and assembly line processes allowed for rapid, reliable output on a scale that Germany could not match. Germany attempted to address this firepower gap through multiple initiatives. The G43 semi-automatic rifle entered service in 1943, but production remained insufficient to equip more than select specialized units. The STG-44, introduced later that year, represented a revolutionary step toward the modern assault rifle, yet with only 425,000 units manufactured, it could not significantly shift the balance of firepower. By 1944, German tactical manuals were revised to acknowledge the superiority of American small arms. New defensive strategies emphasized deeper fortifications, expanded use of mortars and artillery, and avoidance of direct firefights with US infantry whenever possible. These measures, however, were largely reactive, amounting to tactical withdrawal rather than genuine solutions to the underlying disparity. Intelligence reports from the US Army noted a growing reluctance among German forces on the Western Front to launch infantry assaults, reflecting a defensive mindset imposed by inferior weaponry. This material disadvantage contributed directly to the Wehrmacht's inability to regain operational momentum following the Normandy breakout. The influence of the M1 Garand extended beyond individual firefights. Its reliability, semi-automatic firepower, and sheer production numbers shaped combined arms tactics, forcing German commanders to rethink offensive strategies and emphasizing the critical role of industrial capacity in modern warfare. In this way, the rifle not only provided a tactical edge on the battlefield but also symbolized the broader strategic advantage held by the United States in terms of both manufacturing and sustained combat effectiveness. German military tactics during World War II placed heavy emphasis on close cooperation between tanks and infantry. Armor units were expected to move in tight coordination with foot soldiers to safeguard against anti-tank teams and other infantry-based threats. However, this doctrine faced significant challenges when confronted with well-armed American troops. In July 1944, during Operation Cobra, the Allied breakout from the Normandy hedgerows, German tank crews reported that accompanying infantry were often unable to maintain pace or cohesion due to the constant hail of American rifle fire. Tanks that advanced without infantry support became particularly exposed, leaving them vulnerable to bazooka teams and artillery observers. The semi-automatic M1 Garand rifle, with its higher rate of fire, amplified the defensive potential of American forces and complicated German assault tactics. This pattern was again evident in August 1944, during the German counteroffensive at Mortain. The U.S. 30th Infantry Division successfully defended key terrain, in part because each foxhole could deliver continuous, accurate fire. Such firepower made frontal attacks extremely costly for German forces, demonstrating the tactical advantage provided by rapid, sustained rifle fire. The Americans' expertise with semi-automatic rifles had been honed in the Pacific Theater, where they faced Japanese units armed with bolt-action Arisaka rifles. In that environment, U.S. Marines and Army units developed methods that maximized the advantage of higher rate of fire weapons. Techniques such as vertical envelopment, in which suppressive rifle fire pinned enemy positions while forces maneuvered to strike from less expected directions, proved adaptable and effective in Europe against German defenders. The decentralized application of firepower allowed American units to pressure the enemy continuously while moving, a flexibility that German infantry, reliant on slower bolt-action rifles, could rarely match. The rapid firing capability of the M1 Garand also created enormous logistical demands. American divisions in Europe required roughly 10 times the small arms ammunition of comparable German units. The US met this need through an extensive industrial and logistical effort. For instance, the Lake City Army ammunition plant alone was producing over 3 million rounds of 36A ammunition daily by 1944. The famed Red Bull Express truck convoys ensured a steady flow of ammunition to the front lines, allowing U.S. soldiers to carry 8,100 rounds in the field, compared with the standard German load of about 60 rounds, supplemented with continual resupply. This consistent availability of ammunition enabled tactics that German forces, trained to conserve bullets, often found baffling. American units made extensive use of reconnaissance by fire, deliberately firing into suspected enemy positions to provoke a response. While this approach might have seemed wasteful by German standards, it proved highly effective. Training programs were adapted to exploit the M1 Garand's capabilities. At Fort Benning, the U.S. Infantry School emphasized rapid target acquisition over traditional marksmanship. Soldiers practiced instinctive shooting, engaging multiple targets quickly without requiring a perfectly aligned sight picture. The Train Fire program, launched in 1943, incorporated pop-up targets at varying ranges, simulating realistic battlefield conditions and building soldiers' muscle memory for fast, accurate shooting. In contrast, German infantry training prioritized deliberate, precise shots and careful ammunition management, reflecting a fundamentally different tactical philosophy. The combination of semi-automatic rifles, abundant ammunition, and innovative tactics allowed American infantry to maintain high operational tempo and adaptability on the battlefield. German forces, constrained by doctrine and equipment, found themselves at a continuous disadvantage whenever engaging well-prepared U.S. units. This dynamic illustrates how small arms technology, logistics, and tactical doctrine interacted to shape combat outcomes in both the European and Pacific theaters. American infantry tactics during World War II gradually shifted to exploit the strengths of semi-automatic rifles. Small units, such as fire teams, gained new operational flexibility because any soldier could lay down suppressive fire, allowing teammates to maneuver without waiting for specialized support. This development effectively blurred the historical separation between soldiers assigned to fire roles and those responsible for movement, as every rifleman could now sustain a rapid rate of fire. In the autumn of 1944, during the assault on the Siegfried Line, U.S. forces demonstrated the practical impact of this evolution. German defensive positions, engineered to funnel attacking troops into pre-designated machine gun kill zones, were unexpectedly vulnerable to continuous rifle fire, reports from the U.S. First Army highlighted that M1 Garand fire could suppress firing apertures in German bunkers, creating safe windows for engineers to approach and deploy demolition charges. A single American platoon's concentrated firepower could simultaneously incapacitate multiple enemy strongpoints, undermining the mutual support that the defenders had relied on. Urban operations later that year, such as the fighting in Ardennes in October 1944, further illustrated the M1 Garands' battlefield advantages. In close-quarters combat, the ability to discharge 8 rounds in rapid succession without manually cycling the bolts provided U.S. troops with a decisive edge in clearing buildings and rooms, outperforming German soldiers armed with bolt-action rifles. Additionally, the Garand's gas-operated mechanism exceeded expectations in reliability under harsh conditions, including mud, debris, and the freezing winter of 1944-45, which caused problems for other weapons systems. Unlike the exposed bolt of the Carabiner 98K, the M1's enclosed operating rod and gas system allowed it to continue functioning efficiently in adverse environments. Maintenance demands were also reduced. While both the M1 Garand and the Kar 98K required periodic care, the semi-automatic design minimized the amount of time soldiers needed to expose themselves to enemy fire while reloading. The M-block clip system, initially criticized for the audible ping when ejecting, actually offered combat benefits. Troops could reload by touch in low light or visually impaired conditions simply by inserting a fresh clip into the rifle. German troops, by contrast, were compelled to feed individual rounds into the internal magazine of their bolt-action rifles, a slower and more dexterous procedure. The M1 Garand also reflected broader American industrial strategy applied to warfare. The U.S. prioritized mass production of serviceable, reliable weapons over meticulous handcrafting. In 1944, the unit cost of an M1 Garand was approximately $85, comparable to the production cost of a Kar 98K, but American factories could produce rifles at 3 times the German rate. This efficiency extended through logistics, including standardized ammunition, interchangeable components, and simplified maintenance procedures. Damaged rifles could often be repaired in the field using parts from other rifles, whereas repairing a Kar 98K frequently required specialized armorers. Strategically, this allowed the United States to equip a rapidly expanding army with modern firearms while continuing to manufacture tanks, aircraft, and naval vessels. Germany, constrained by limited resources and Allied bombing campaigns, could not match this output even with less complex bolt-action rifles. Following Germany's surrender in May 1945, U.S. Army operational research teams conducted thorough investigations into infantry combat performance. Analyses derived from battle records and prisoner debriefings confirmed the significant impact of the M1 Garand. Statistical evaluation revealed that American rifle companies were capable of producing more than 3 times the volume of small arms fire compared to German units. Engagement durations also increased dramatically, with firefights extending from a typical 5 to 10 minute window to 30 to 45 minutes, illustrating the sustained firepower made possible by semi-automatic rifles. The introduction of the M1 Garand fundamentally changed the way American infantry operated on the battlefield. Unlike earlier bolt-action rifles, soldiers armed with the Garand could advance under direct enemy fire without having to wait for supporting machine guns or mortars to suppress the opposition. General George S. Patton famously praised the rifle as the most effective weapon ever created for combat, a statement that reflected not only the firearm's technical strengths, but also its revolutionary impact on infantry tactics. By giving individual soldiers the capacity for sustained, accurate fire, the money allowed the U.S. Army to develop doctrines that prioritized mobility, rapid maneuvering, and aggressive engagements over rigid defensive postures. German military analysts, reflecting on the Second World War, acknowledged their misjudgment of the semi-automatic rifle's importance. General Franz Halder, a former chief of the German General Staff, later admitted that the Wehrmacht had failed to grasp how a tactical edge in standard infantry weapons could outweigh superior training or battlefield experience. The lessons of these miscalculations became evident when West Germany re-established its armed forces in 1955. The newly formed Bundeswehr chose to equip its troops with fully automatic rifles from the outset, initially adopting the FNFAL-based gun and later transitioning to the GI. From that point onward, no German army would rely on bolt-action rifles as the primary weapon of its infantry. This procurement strategy reflected a deliberate effort to avoid repeating the technological disadvantages faced during World War II. Internal planning documents emphasized that future German forces must maintain parity or superiority in the most fundamental infantry arms. The enduring impact of facing overwhelming American firepower influenced German defense planning for decades. Moreover, the success of the M1 Garand had a global effect on military thought. In the post-war years, major powers rapidly moved to issue semi-automatic or fully automatic rifles to their troops. The Soviet Union developed the SKS and subsequently the AK-47, while Britain produced the EM2 and France introduced the MAS-49, all initiatives inspired by the demonstrated effectiveness of semi-automatic fire in World War II. The Korean War further validated these lessons. Initially, US forces equipped with the M1 Garand enjoyed a clear advantage over North Korean and Chinese units, who were still largely armed with bolt-action rifles. This superiority in small arms firepower allowed American troops to maneuver more freely and apply sustained suppressive fire. However, the gap narrowed as Communist forces began receiving modern Soviet semi-automatic weapons. The tactical innovations associated with the M1 Garand had lasting implications for modern infantry doctrine. The principle of distributed firepower emerged. Every soldier became a key contributor to a unit's overall fire capability, rather than merely carrying ammunition to support a small number of machine gunners. Contemporary squad-level tactics, emphasizing agility, decentralized decision-making, and rapid responses to dynamic battlefield conditions, trace their roots to the capabilities introduced by semi-automatic rifles. The ability of individual soldiers to deliver effective suppressive fire while simultaneously maneuvering remains a cornerstone of modern infantry operations, a legacy directly tied to the transformative impact of the M1 Garand. The M1 Garand illustrated how industrial strength could decisively shape battlefield outcomes. The United States' capacity to manufacture sophisticated firearms on a massive scale without sacrificing reliability or consistency revealed that success in 20th-century conflicts depended as much on production capability as on battlefield strategy. This principle extended well beyond rifles. The same methods that enabled the creation of millions of M1 Garands were applied to the large-scale manufacture of tanks, aircraft, and naval vessels. By merging mass production techniques with military specifications, the United States fundamentally altered the logistics, planning, and overall execution of modern warfare. The M1 Garand's influence went further than numerical firepower. It equipped American troops, many of whom were civilian draftees with limited prior military training, with a clear, practical advantage over experienced German soldiers. This technological superiority not only improved combat effectiveness but also enhanced soldier morale, instilling confidence that encouraged more assertive and coordinated tactical maneuvers. In contrast, German units increasingly suffered from declining morale when confronting the firepower of American semi-automatic weapons. Post-war assessments suggested that awareness of American weapon superiority had tangible effects on German recruitment, training programs, and operational efficiency during the conflict's later stages. The Garand's edge over the German Karabiner 98K extended beyond simple mechanical performance. It signified a transformative shift in infantry warfare. The era of the bolt-action rifle, which had dominated since the late 19th century, effectively came to an end across the hedgerows of Normandy, the dense Ardennes forests, and the shattered urban centers of the Reich. German forces, entering World War II confident in their tactical doctrines and seasoned combat experience, soon recognized that American industrial output combined with semi-automatic weaponry had rendered their traditional infantry strategies obsolete. No matter how skilled a soldier was with a bolt-action rifle, the rate and consistency of fire achievable with semi-automatic weapons like the Garand simply could not be matched. This technological transformation was decisive and irreversible. The dominance of bolt-action rifles in frontline infantry roles was permanently eclipsed. Henceforth, modern armies would prioritize semi-automatic and fully automatic systems as their standard infantry armament, marking a pivotal evolution in military history. The experiences of 1943 to 1945 demonstrated a profound shift in the principles of warfare. Sheer firepower, large-scale production, and rapid technological innovation had begun to outweigh the traditional military qualities of discipline, training, and battlefield experience. Among the transformative tools of this era was the M1 Garand rifle, which did more than simply aid Allied victories. It fundamentally altered the way infantry engagements were fought. Each time a German soldier had to pause to manually operate his bolt while American troops fired semi-automatic rounds in rapid succession, a new paradigm of combat was unfolding. This new model favored nations capable of converting industrial strength into battlefield superiority, equipping their soldiers with weapons and ammunition that outmatched older designs. The German military had anticipated a conflict in which tactical skill, unit cohesion, and accumulated combat knowledge would determine outcomes. Instead, they confronted an opponent whose democratic industrial system allowed every infantryman to wield a semi-automatic rifle with abundant ammunition. The resulting imbalance did not merely produce isolated defeats, it signaled the obsolescence of a long-standing approach to warfare. Bolt-action rifles and the doctrines structured around them were rendered outdated by a weapon that delivered 8 rounds rapidly without the need for manual cycling. German forces were unprepared for this level of firepower and never fully adapted, a shortcoming that contributed to their inability to recover strategically. The seemingly simple difference between an 8-round en-bloc clip and a 5-round stripper clip carried consequences far beyond individual skirmishes. It represented the collapse of an entire military philosophy. The era of industrialized warfare had arrived, defined by the capacity to translate factory output into decisive battlefield effects, one semi-automatic discharge at a time. This analysis relies on a combination of historical documentation, post-war evaluations, and technical assessments conducted by the United States Army and other military scholars. While the interpretation focuses on broader tactical consequences, all reference dates, unit designations, production statistics, and weapon specifications are sourced from verified historical records. The discussion presents a scholarly interpretation of these events rather than making absolute claims about the experiences of individual soldiers on the front lines.